The Star Citizen universe is about to witness the largest single ship invasion in gaming history. When the RSI Perseus drops, we're not talking about a few dozen ships scattered across servers. We're talking about literal fleets that will blot out the sun above every major landing zone. The community discussions reveal something Cloud Imperium games never anticipated: what happens when scarcity-balanced content meets abundance-level ownership. The math is terrifying. The implications go far beyond server stability. Every major ship release teaches us something about human nature in virtual spaces. The Carrack showed us exploration fever. The Polaris demonstrated the torpedo meta. But tracking Perseus ownership patterns reveals something entirely different. When you backed your Perseus during concept, if you were lucky enough to get one, you probably thought you'd be among a select few hundred pilots. The reality sitting in hangars right now tells a completely different story. Organizations aren't just buying one Perseus. They're stockpiling them like ammunition for a war that hasn't started yet. And when patch 4.4 goes live, you're about to discover whether Star Citizen's infrastructure can handle what's essentially a stress test, disguised as a ship launch. The Perseus represents RSI's answer to the gunboat destroyer role, a multi-crew vessel engineered specifically to hunt larger ships with dual-size 7 main turrets. Picture a naval destroyer translated to space, fast enough to run down bigger prey, armed enough to cripple capital ships, but critically vulnerable to coordinated fighter swarms. The fundamental miscalculation: everyone's making centers on balance assumptions. CIG designed this ship expecting natural scarcity through price point and crew requirements. Instead, community data suggests nearly every major organization has multiple Perseus ships waiting in their fleet roster. The current game balance assumes maybe 30 Perseus ships across all servers. Conservative estimates put actual ownership closer to the thousands. When scarcity-balanced content meets abundance-level deployment, established meta gets obliterated overnight. Think about it. The entire combat ecosystem was calibrated around these ships being rare. Now they're about to become common as auroras. Most Star Citizen analysis misses the real paradigm shift happening. Current ship roles exist in careful balance. Hammerheads dominate anti-fighter operations, Polaris handles anti-capital work, Connies fill the multi-role gap. The Perseus was designed to hunt that middle tier: Connies, Corsairs, larger solo ships. But when 50 Perseus ships occupy a single server instance, traditional combat roles become meaningless abstractions. The Polaris release offered a preview, but with critical differences. Polaris ownership stayed relatively contained due to the 700+ price barrier. Even then, seeing 15 Polaris ships simultaneously at major landing zones caused measurable performance degradation. The Perseus sits at 675, but psychological pricing makes it feel significantly more accessible. More importantly, organizations view it as a fleet backbone rather than a flagship purchase. During recent Ship Showdown events, Perseus discussions dominated every major org channel. These aren't individual vanity purchases. Entire military structures have been reorganized around Perseus squadron deployment. The ripple effects extend beyond simple numbers. When you have this concentration of mid-tier capital ships, smaller vessels become either completely obsolete or critically important depending on their role. Light fighters suddenly become invaluable as Perseus hunters, while ships like the Constellation find themselves in an impossible middle ground. You know what's funny about all this? We're basically watching the same pattern that happens in every multiplayer game when a new balanced weapon gets released. Except instead of everyone running around with the same overpowered rifle, it's going to be fleets of gunboats. And just like those games, the real winners are usually the players who stick with the boring old equipment that suddenly becomes incredibly effective against the new hotness. Speaking of patterns you might want to stick around for, there's a subscribe button somewhere around here that's probably feeling pretty lonely right about now. If you're thinking this sounds like another pay-to-win ships ruin everything complaint, pause that assumption. The Perseus has a vulnerability most owners haven't fully internalized yet. Remember trying to find reliable gunners for multi-crew ships? The Perseus pilot controls essentially zero offensive capability. No pilot weapons, no missile systems. Without gunners, you're piloting an expensive, slow-moving target. The ship's greatest strength requires the game's scarcest resource: competent, available crew members. The crew logistics create a mathematical impossibility that's about to become painfully obvious. Each Perseus requires minimum 3 players for basic functionality, pilot plus 2 gunners for the main turrets. 50 Perseus ships demand 150 coordinated players just for skeleton crews. Optimal operation needs 5 to 7 crew members per ship when you factor in engineering, scanning, and defensive positions. Human psychology collides with game mechanics in predictable ways. Every Perseus owner plans to test it solo first on launch day. The pattern repeats with every multi-crew release. Excitement overrides practical limitations. You've probably experienced this yourself with other ships, that irresistible urge to immediately spawn your new toy, regardless of crew availability. The aftermath becomes predictable, yet spectacular. Dozens of unmanned Perseus ships will drift through popular systems, their owners frantically cycling through chat channels, begging for gunners. Meanwhile, dedicated salvage crews have been preparing for exactly this scenario. Reclaimer and Vulture pilots have been coordinating in their own channels, planning routes between major landing zones to capitalize on the inevitable wreckage fields. Some salvage organizations have been deliberately avoiding profitable runs for weeks, keeping their ships hungry for the Perseus feeding frenzy. It's like watching someone buy a Formula One car and then realizing they need a pit crew, a racing team, and about 50 other people just to make it around the track once. Except the track is space, and when you crash, everyone with a salvage ship shows up to pick through your wreckage like vultures at a roadkill buffet. This pattern mirrors what happened during your first week with any major multi-crew ship. That moment when you finally got access to something like a Hammerhead or a Polaris loaner, the excitement was overwhelming. You spent those first 20 minutes just walking through corridors, taking screenshots, imagining the epic battles ahead. Then reality hit during your first combat encounter. 3 light fighters found your position, and suddenly that massive warship felt like a floating coffin. No amount of armor or shields compensates for empty turrets. You probably remember that sinking realization, watching your expensive warship get slowly chipped apart while you sat helpless in the pilot seat. The choice between abandoning ship or riding it down to destruction. Most players choose abandonment, leaving these massive vessels as monuments to overconfidence. That exact scenario will play out hundreds of times during Perseus launch week, except the scale will be unprecedented. The development behind CIG's preparation for this chaos tells its own story. The improvements we've seen in 4.3.2 with server meshing and entity streaming optimizations were specifically targeting high-density ship scenarios. The Perseus isn't just a ship release, it's functioning as an unintentional stress test for every back-end system they've developed over the past year. But smart players recognize the real opportunity. While everyone fights over gunner positions or flies solo into disaster, support operations will generate massive profits. Medical gameplay becomes critical when you have hundreds of players attempting complex multi-crew operations. Repair and rearm services will see unprecedented demand. Most importantly, salvage operations will have more material than they can process. The tactical advantage belongs to players who think beyond direct participation. Stock medical supplies, ammunition, repair materials, and fuel. Position support ships near major trade routes and combat zones. The Perseus owners will pay premium prices for services that keep their expensive ships operational. A single Cutlass Red or Vulcan positioned strategically can generate more profit than attempting to crew a Perseus. Advanced players should consider Perseus hunting operations. Coordinated light fighter squadrons can systematically target undermanned Perseus ships, creating both PvP content and salvage opportunities. The key involves identifying which Perseus ships lack proper crew support, usually obvious from their movement patterns and response times. A properly crewed Perseus is terrifying. An undermanned one is just expensive target practice. The Star Citizen subreddit has been documenting this phenomenon for weeks. That viral fleet formation post generated over 2,700 upvotes because it crystallized what everyone suspects but hasn't articulated. We're approaching a critical mass event. Comment threads reveal fascinating splits in community psychology. Veteran players are planning strategic withdrawals from major systems, while newer players see opportunity in the chaos. Organization channels have transformed into military logistics operations. Fleet commanders are creating detailed deployment schedules, crew rotation systems, and supply chain management protocols. The level of coordination resembles actual military planning more than typical gaming organization. Some groups have been running Perseus crew training sessions using Hammerhead proxies, developing communication protocols and engagement procedures. The dedication is impressive. The results will probably be hilarious. Your Perseus launch strategy should account for these realities. If you own a Perseus, resist the solo flight temptation on day 1. Instead, spend the weeks before launch building reliable crew relationships. Identify players in your time zone who understand multi-crew mechanics and communication requirements. Practice with existing ships like the Hammerhead to develop crew chemistry before the Perseus becomes available. Non-Perseus owners should position themselves strategically. Light fighters become incredibly valuable. Arrow, Gladius, and Razor pilots will have unlimited targets. Support ship operators should stock consumables and position near high-traffic areas. Salvage crews should coordinate with each other to avoid territorial conflicts over wreckage fields. Most importantly, avoid major landing zones during the first 48 to 72 hours unless you enjoy single-digit frame rates and extended loading screens. The initial chaos will be spectacular, but largely unproductive. Wait for the initial wave to crash before engaging with Perseus-heavy areas. Consider alternative gameplay loops during launch week. Mining, trading, and exploration will face reduced competition as the majority of players focus on Perseus operations. This creates temporary profit opportunities in normally competitive markets. The Perseus invasion represents more than just another ship release. It's a fundamental shift in Star Citizen's player-driven ecosystem. Your strategy determines whether you profit from the chaos or become part of it. Drop your Perseus launch plans in the comments. Are you crewing one, hunting them, or capitalizing on support opportunities? The community needs coordination to make this work, and every perspective adds value to the collective preparation effort. The Perseus launch will test everything Star Citizen has built toward over the past decade. Server technology, player coordination, game balance, and community resilience all face their biggest challenge yet. Whether this becomes Star Citizen's finest hour or its most spectacular failure depends entirely on how well players adapt to unprecedented scale. In a universe where preparation determines survival, the smart money is on those who see opportunity where others see only chaos.